Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hey friends, I just wanted to pop in and talk a little bit about MBO behind the scenes. When I entered the yoga world as a teacher, I was surprised by how many yoga teachers were struggling with the business side of yoga. And that's why I created MBO. MBOM helps yoga teachers and studio owners become entrepreneurs. It helps you to go from surviving to thriving with your yoga business. I am on a mission to change the yoga industry, to teach yoga teachers and studio owners about the business of yoga, and to help you feel more confident, successful, and abundant. After releasing hundreds of podcast episodes, I want to create content that dives deeper into helping yoga entrepreneurs thrive and elevate their businesses. This is where MBOM Behind the Scenes comes in. Each week, you will get bonus content from the weekly guest or myself, diving deeper into how you can take the teachings and apply them to your business. This podcast is designed for yoga teachers and studio owners who are ready to take it to the next level. If you enjoy MBOM and have been looking for an affordable way to learn more, this is it. For the cost of 2 lattes per month, you will get never-before-heard content that you can't access anywhere else that will give you tangible ways to dive deeper into your yoga business. If this sounds like something you're interested in, let's dive in. Head on over to patreon.com/MBOM yoga and sign up to get behind the scenes now. Once again, that's patreon.com/MBOM yoga to get all the exclusive behind the scenes content. I'll see you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the MBOM podcast. I am super excited that you've decided to join me for today's episode of the show. This episode is brought to you by Offering Tree, an all-in-one, easy-to-use online business platform that I've been working with for years. If you're looking to save time, energy, and money, definitely check out Offering Tree. And don't forget to grab your special discount at offeringtree.com/MBOM. I'll be telling you a little bit more about Offering Tree so you can get a sense for if they are right for you and your business a little bit later on. But for now, let's dive into the episode. This week on the podcast, I am excited to be joined by Mark Breadner. Mark is a yoga teacher and the founder of Yoga Coach Academy. Mark has been teaching for over 40 years and is one of Australia's most educated yoga teachers. And after years of teaching yoga, he has shifted his business to be an online business where he helps yoga teachers with step-by-step support to help them shift online and make more impact, more service, and more money that aligns with their brands. And Mark specializes in something called the inner and outer game, and he teaches yoga teachers how to match the internal mindset to overcome the external obstacles of tech overwhelm and marketing, amongst much more. So in this episode, we dive into Mark's yoga journey. We talk about his shift to online, how he supports yoga teachers with his step-by-step method, and what it actually means to master the inner and outer game. Mark has a ton of good information to share, and I think you're going to really love this episode. So let's get to it. Here is Mark. Welcome to the podcast today, Mark. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Great to be here, Amanda. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you tell listeners where you're joining us from today?
I'm in Bali, Island of the Gods. Good place to be right now.
Yeah. Where do you live in Bali?
It's called Unggusan, but it's out on the Uluwatu Peninsula where the main sort of surfing focus is, because that's my other love in life besides yoga, surfing.
Oh my gosh, sounds absolutely amazing. Bali has a special place in my heart. I love it so much. Hopefully I'll be able to return there sometime soon in the next couple of years. But Mark, I'm just really excited to dive in with you and just hear all the goodness that you've got to share with myself and listeners today. And I was hoping that we could start with hearing a little bit about your yoga story. I know you've been practicing yoga for a long time. Can you tell us how you first got into it?
Yeah, well, I was kind of fortunate. My mum was one of the first teachers in Australia, like regular teachers. She started teaching early 60s, and she taught at home downstairs in the rumpus room. And, I started when I was 5, and it was just something to do. It was there and I did it. But I just connected into something right from day dot. There was something that drew me to it, and I haven't looked back from there. It's been my whole career has been primarily focused in yoga, and I've worked in so many different areas and modalities of it, and constantly changing. But yeah, I was really lucky, and I started apprenticing with my mum when I was 15, working with Down syndrome children and asthmatic kids at the local hospital, and then started my own practice when I was 18. It's evolved into, teacher trainings and niching down into, I worked in elite sport, I worked in corporate, I worked in disability. And now, our focus, the pivot, like a lot of people, is transitioning online.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's really cool to hear that you've been practicing yoga since you were 5. I feel like there's not a lot of people who can say that. And hopefully more in the future, though, as more and more kids are practicing yoga younger and younger. But one thing I'd love to chat about was just kind of hear a little bit about like, living in Bali. What was your business kind of like pre-pandemic, like pre-March 2020?
Amanda, I've been doing yoga education for 25 years, and I was in quite a bit of transition before the pandemic started. I'd stopped doing 200-hour trainings maybe 6 years ago because I didn't see the point of throwing teachers into a saturated market and primarily into, without offense, but alternate fitness market for a lot of people, and they weren't getting paid their value. And I just didn't see the point in doing it. So I created Yoga Life Coach, which was the add-on 300, and that was teaching people how to work one-on-one, more niche based. And that was great. They tripled their hourly rate pretty much straight away. But outside of their warm audience or the people that knew them, it had a glass ceiling. So I went back to the drawing board, and I'm slightly obsessed with yoga teachers being, impactful and abundant. So I was like, what needs to happen? How can I do this so I can honor the lineage of my teachers and this amazing system of transformation and help teachers to be abundant as well? So that was naturally leading me to online. So I'd been working on that for 5-6 years beforehand, and we transitioned 1,000 hours of training online in October 2019. So then when that came about in around March 2020, we were pretty well positioned as far as online was concerned. And we thought, hey, this is going to be good for work because a lot of people have to go online. But what we found now is it's probably a little worse off in that sense because so many people have jumped on to help yoga teachers go online or in any industry go online. So it's very competitive, and like anything, there's some great stuff and gems in there, and there's lots of ordinary stuff as well. So it's interesting. It's an interesting process at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it has been an interesting transition for so many yoga teachers and yoga educators. And I think it's really cool that you were shifting your business already. And I know you told me before we started recording that you actually moved to Bali, pre-pandemic. So you didn't really get stuck there. You were already making that move. And I think it's kind of interesting to sort of look at just like the way things are shifting. And maybe before we get there, one thing I wanted to kind of just pick your brain about a little bit is you mentioned, steering away from these 200-hour trainings and focusing in on this like 300-hour add-on that teaches people how to work with people one-on-one, have a niche, and charge more for their services, which are 3 things that I'm all about. Can you tell me a little bit more about, I guess, just that and then your kind of thought process behind that?
Yeah, I think the teacher education process has devolved over the years. And I think the regulatory bodies are a big part of the problem because they made the standards so ambiguous and low. So primarily, in a 200-hour training, the largest percentage of that is physically focused. And while it's an important part of a system, it's only a small important part of a whole complete system. And largely a lot of that's left out. And I get that that's the bread and butter for studios, doing, asana classes, and people come in as, fitness and stress and stretching and all those sorts of things. I get that. But there's so much more to, what's possible. And I think now we're going to be less defined by what we do, like e.g. a yoga teacher, and we'll be more known by the problem that we solve. And I think it's going to go much more niche based. And because of that, we're asked to work, with different individuals on a whole level, a whole being sort of thing. And I think what's encouraging to me is a lot of teachers now are asking, what's next? I know how to work with the physical body, but how do I work with the subtle body? How do I work with the mental, emotional body? And how do I change consciousness? And I think if yoga teachers can be educated correctly in that sense, then I think yoga teachers can be at the leading edge of, health, well-being, and transformation on the planet. That's my vision for it. And I think it's very possible because, yogi's got to this highest level of what's possible as a human, right, through direct experience. And then they came and mapped it out for us. And we have texts at our fingertips that show us how to do it. And if you can contemporize those and put them into a method, into a system and language it in a way that people understand, that teachers understand, so they can pass it on to students, I think the sky's the limit. I think it's the time now for yoga teachers, personally.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this kind of weird sort of time in history where I feel like, we need these practices more than ever. We need people tuning into their mental space and their minds and their intuition and their breath and that type of thing. So I completely agree with you. We definitely need these practices. And I think it's one thing that you mentioned that really resonates with me is just how these sort of, I guess, like 200-hour, 300 hours have been set sort of ambiguously. And I don't know like the history of Yoga Alliance doing that or anything, but I remember just from my first 200-hour, just feeling like this is like not enough. Like I have not learned nearly enough to feel like I'm qualified to say like, hey, I'm a yoga teacher now. And even with the 300-hour and, years of teaching experience, I still feel like there's so much to learn. And that goes for pretty much like all category. And of course, we have to learn like the physical practice so we can teach that safely. But then, there's so much to learn around anatomy and there's so much to learn around philosophy. And then, there's the other 7 limbs of yoga. I'm curious, like, what are your sort of thoughts on, and maybe you don't have to like solve all the problems of yoga, but I'm just kind of curious, like, what are your thoughts on how we actually like create well-rounded yoga teachers?
Well, I think the teachers have to be, stepping up and offering beyond that. I mean, you can only meet people where they're at. And so meeting people where they're at, as far as the education system was concerned, was primarily at the physical. It's just how it was. That's cool. It's all good. But I think now it's changing. For example, there's a mental health pandemic in the world at the moment. And really, that's our home. Like yoga, mastery of the mind, like understanding the mind and being able to navigate the mind and, set aside the things that don't serve us. There's a real big niche there, a possibility for yoga teachers to work in. And I think it's happening. I think I see a lot of teachers gravitating towards like tantric hatha, working with the pranic system, like all those things. But it tends to get a little bit trendy before it gets deep. So, for example, breath work's very trendy at the moment, doing, hyperventilation type breathing and stimulating the system and things like this. But that's cool because it brings a mass amount of people to the starting place of working with prana. But of course, there's so much more. And we've got a whole science called Swara Yoga, which is a massive text on working with prana and the breath. It's so incredible what's possible. But there's two things. We have to offer it, but people have to be open to it. And I think both of those things are happening. So it's encouraging to do that. And, I think, and for me, my focus is bridging the spiritual and the material. So how do we take this inspired way of living? How do we take, what's unique about us, reigniting our spirit and then injecting that spirit into business? And I think that makes a big difference when you're running a business that's fueled by spirit, fueled by the yogic principles, and you're really there to serve people in a way that helps them be better humans. And I think that's, as yoga business, that's what we can do. It's a good focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's really beautiful. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about like how we actually go about injecting spirit into our business.
In our program, Yogi Online, we have like 3 phases. The first one is the inner game, then soul bridge, and then outer game. Now, I spent about 200 grand in the last 6 years working with the inverted commas, business gurus who were at the kind of leading edge of marketing and online and that digital space. And it was an incredible and fantastic at marketing, fantastic at mechanics and tactics and all those sorts of things. But what I would see over and over again is in the group coaching, somebody would come with their imposter syndrome or their self-doubt or not enough. And then the coaches, like 99% of the time, had no idea what to do with that. It was like, okay, next, or go and do module 2.A/36. They didn't know how to work with the individual. And it's so important. There's a quote, it's attributed to a few people. I remember it as one from Anthony Robbins, that success is 80% psychology, 20% mechanics. Most of what gets taught out there in running a business is the mechanics. But let's say in a high ticket program, less than 20% launch. And if they've got good instruction, a good roadmap, they've got great support, well, why is it that 80% of people aren't able to launch? And it comes back to that psychology. And that's really, again, what makes what we do unique, and what makes yoga unique is that we work with the individual, so that you have to, if you're going to step into a higher vision for yourself, if you're going to step into the unknown and bring more potency and bring more heart and compassion and bring more wisdom, then if you could do it yourself, you would have already done it. And there's limitations that show up. So you have to be able to have practices. You need to be able to have a community, have guides or mentors that are cheering you on, that are helping you across the bumps, so that we can start removing the interference, all these obstacles to your success. And without it, I think it's very, very difficult to be able to step in and embody that higher place that you want to go to. Like, super hard. Some people can do it by sheer will and determination, but most people, their resistance overcomes it. So in the inner game stuff, the first thing we work with is being honest. If we're going from A to B, most people are pretty good with B. They know where they want to go. They can give you a pretty good detail of what that is. Where most people fall over is they're not honest where they are at A, like where they are now. And if you're not honest in how you are with your finances, with your self-esteem, with your family, with your kids, with your passions, with your addictions, what gets in the way, it's very hard for a coach or a mentor or a community to support you to get to that place. But the more you're honest with that, the more we can help clear that out of the way. And we call it summoning your potential, reigniting your spirit, because we all give it up at some point in our life to different degrees, but we have to recall that. And then we have master practices that clear the interference. And then the idea is to look at your yogi's journey and join the dots and look at, why did you have those struggles? Why did you have those challenges? The successes that you had, what have you learned? What makes you unique? What what makes you powerful to walk in someone's shoes and show them how to solve the problem and get to where they want to go. So that's kind of the reclaiming the spirit, and then injecting it into business means putting that into a soul message, putting it into an irresistible offer, putting it into a world-class product. And then the outer game is building business systems around that. So that's how we kind of work with it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I think that that's really interesting to think about the 20% mechanics, 80% psychology. And I feel like I can really resonate with that, like even in my own business, having, tools and, things that can help me with success. But then often I feel like the things that actually could get in my way from launching something new or doing the work that needs to be done to achieve that next step is myself. Like it's not because I don't have the tools in my toolbox or I don't have access to them. It's usually because there's something, standing in my own way, like energetically or mentally. And that's sort of what you mean by like working with the inner game. Is that correct? Like working on sort of that anything that's going on with you mentally, emotionally on the inside?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of yoga teachers come to yoga from a wounding type of thing, and I generalize, but most people, because they feel that there's something missing, something wrong, there's an emptiness. I can be a better version of myself, and yoga's a system to do that. There's a number of systems, but yoga's one of them. Yoga's amazing because it's very practical and pragmatic. It works on all levels very practically. So a lot of people are drawn to it from there. But in that process, we're working to build our value. We're working to build our self-esteem. We're working to build our ability to be able to step up. A lot of us as teachers, it's part of our journey. And also, as an aside to that, most yoga teachers are broke because they really struggle around the value of what they do, the value in themselves and the value of what they do, and taking it out into the world. Right? A lot struggle with that. And I think it's just part and parcel of the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something I've had so many conversations about this on the podcast. It's something I teach when I work with yoga teachers is like having a relationship with money is important because we need to be able to support ourselves. And I just like hate the idea of, I guess, like quote unquote, like broke yoga teachers. Like, I don't think we have to live in that type of situation. I'd be curious to hear like what is some of the work that you do with your students in terms of helping them understand that like what they offer is valuable and that they can charge for it. Like that's okay.
Well, it comes back again to the inner game thing, because the more that you can, summon your potential and reignite your spirit, and it's like sit on the mountaintop and own it, like own your journey, warts and all, and you can really sit into that, then there's a real fire that gets communicated through you, or the spirit comes out, and you speak with passion, you speak with authority. There's an expertise in there, and it really starts to create a market of one, because even though you might be working in the same niche as a number of people, it's very unique the way that you're presenting it. It's not the latest trend. It's not the current person that's doing really well and mimicking them. It just comes from you, and the more that we can sit into that, the easier it is to start charging those high ticket, because we started high ticket. We get our students to charge $3,000 and above for their high ticket program. There's a number of reasons for that, but what we found is many of them really struggle to get to that 3,000. And that's largely because of the value that they see in themselves. Because once they do it a couple of times, they realize, oh my God, I'm undercharging. I'm giving an incredible value. People are getting amazing benefits. The testimonials are fantastic. I need to charge more. And we're like, yes, you do. But at the beginning, most of them are really balk at being able to hold the place where they can charge that dollar figure. And it's just a progression of building and getting stronger in the inner game, which is yoga.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Like there's that people would struggle with these higher price points because there's so many people who are either offering, classes for free or I mean, I've seen like monthly membership programs from yoga teachers like as low as like $5 a month for like unlimited classes for a month. Like that is absolutely wild. That's just not, I mean, that's so underpriced if you're getting like a week's worth of classes and you have unlimited access to that for a month. So it kind of makes sense, right? Like people are kind of being programmed to like, okay, you know, $15 for a drop-in class is like kind of expensive in a lot of places. And, $100 for a membership, like sure, some studios can charge that, but some can't even get away with that. So I definitely understand the mindset of like $3,000. How am I supposed to charge that?
Yeah, but if you compete on price, it's just a race to the bottom. Like you said, in the early days, I think probably Bikram yoga started that out or Ashtanga where it was 30 days for $25, right? And then it was 30 days for $15, and then it was 30 days for $10, and then it's 30 days for $1. It's just a race to the bottom. It's not sustainable to work at that place. It's the same when a lot of yoga teachers will do an information product and they'll be $37, $47. And it's very, very hard to make profit on that because you need quite a few people coming in based on your ad spend. And it's super hard to scale it because you need lots and lots of people to continue on through that to be able to do it. Whereas when you do a high ticket program over $3,000, the big aha about that is you only need to convert actually less than 1% of your leads to get fantastic return on your ad spend. But you've got to be able to sit into the place where you can own the value of that and charge it for your program. And that's where niche base comes in and solving the big problems, because there's people all day, every day spending that money to solve that problem. So we say it's got to be a bleeding neck problem. It's got to be a big problem that your audience has, whatever your niche is, and that you use the system of yoga and your life experience to solve that problem. You create a roadmap, a step-by-step process that shows them how to get to A to B. And if you can solve that problem and you can do that consistently and you get testimonials to show that, then literally people are paying those price points all day, every day to solve those problems.
Yeah. I mean, people will pay for things that they value, right? So I think it's a matter of like communicating that value to people. There's kind of two things that I want to talk about. The first one is so if somebody out there is like, oh my gosh, $3,000, that's crazy. Like, how do I justify charging that much? Like, how do you kind of teach your students to ensure that they are offering enough value to justify that price?
Again, it comes back to your niche, right? Who you're working with. And then you've got to look at all the things like the currencies that you're giving them. Like, what are you going to increase in their life? What are you going to decrease in their life? And when you look at those, you start to dwindle it down. Like, what are the top three things? And then what is the primary currency? What is the primary thing? What is the major transformation these people want? Right? And when I understand what that is, are there people willing to pay for that? Does your audience have the money to pay for it? Right? And then if they do, is there a big enough audience searching for this? And if there is, right, then you create a system or a roadmap or a program step by step to be able to get to that result. I mean, the example, Amanda, is his name eludes me right now, but he was running a handstand program, learning how to do handstands for yoga teachers. And he was charging 10K US. And at the time in mid 2019, he was selling 24, 25 a month. So he's making 250K a month teaching people how to do handstands, right? And people are paying 10K to do a handstand. So I just want to, just the relevance of, I mean, he was charismatic. He knew his stuff. He knew how to teach someone to get to a handstand, but obviously there's a lot of teachers that valued learning how to do handstands for 10K. I don't, but a lot of yoga teachers do. So you'd be surprised at what people are willing to pay for, right? But you've got to be able to make sure that is there, that market's there.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting to hear that example. And I think that that is a good example of like picking something that you are, yourself good at, you're qualified to teach, you know how to teach other people how to do it, building a program around that, and then understanding that your audience like really wants to learn that and that they're willing to pay to learn that. I feel like that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, that's right. So one of my issues has always been that I always pitched it too high. So I'd always speak to the 1%. So in my coaching and working with my mentors, they've always, brought me back. Stop talking to the 1% love it, but the other 99% of people are going, huh? What's he talking about? So, I want to teach Kriya, and I want to teach Tantra, and I want to teach the energetic architecture. And most people are like, what the hell is he talking about? But I just wanted to do that. But it cost me, financially to do that. So I had to keep bringing it back and then work towards it. And, one of my coaches got me to pin up on the wall from Jay-Z, dumb it down and double your dollars. And meaning dumbing down means make it accessible, right? Make it accessible. And so whatever it is, if you're teaching whatever those bigger problems are, it still has to be in their language. You still have to do your market research. It's got to be communicated in the way that people are looking for, a result, the desires they have, the struggles they have, in the way that they'd be sitting around in a cafe discussing it. Not my languaging, which I often did. And it didn't serve me so well.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And one thing you said that I just wanted to come back to was around niching. You were talking about, finding kind of looking at your own journey as a yoga teacher and then finding what you do uniquely well. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I feel like this is a really like cool, interesting way of finding your niche. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, I guess there's two things. There's the yogi's journey, which is the classical hero's journey, and the other way that we would discuss it as yogis is karma. That we all have our karma that leads us to do actions that creates a certain dharma or a pathway, and in an unconscious life, that just becomes looping on repeat. And in a conscious life, we're learning those actions that draw us into life, that draw us to do certain actions and create a particular path where it's designed to help us evolve. And if we do that consciously and we keep looking at our actions and what doesn't serve us and what we need to do and how we're going to evolve and grow and transform and keep doing that so that we do remove these things that hold us in limitation and we open up to new possibilities, we activate, upgrade our energy, we reprogram our mind for success. All of those things is when you understand that karmic journey, then it's not by accident and you're uniquely positioned to help other people take that journey if you're doing it consciously. When you look at the hero's journey, that classic, like all the movies are made on that same template, it's like you're in the known world and there's something that's calling you into the unknown. There's a trigger or some event or just something repetitive that calls you into the unknown. And there's usually a teacher or a guide that brings you into it. But then you go through all your challenges and your struggles and, allies, friends, all that sort of stuff. And then, ultimately a death and a rebirth, and you start to get your successes. And in the end, you come back into the world and you become a master of two worlds and you're teaching from a higher perspective. You're teaching from your journey. You've gone through through the dark forest and you've carved your path and you've broken your bones and bruised yourself and done all this stuff, and you've come out with all your, your gifts and your tools in your kit bag. And then we bring it back to the community. And for me, that's what it is for that yogi's journey. We're not trying to create some niche out of thin air or the popular niche. We're trying to create your life. Take that inspiration and that passion and match it to, well, what was the big issues that you went through, right? What did you learn? What would other people crawl over broken glass to solve themselves? And in those two things, you're uniquely positioned to be able to do it. And it's easy, right? It's easy to communicate from that place once you own it and embody it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm very much aligned with that. I think it's always really interesting, especially with new yoga teachers, to, kind of help them figure out their why in terms of having them look back on sort of like how they got to yoga, like what was the path that they took to find yoga and then make the decision to become a yoga teacher. And so much so with this, it's like once they've kind of become attuned to that or really clear on that, then when they start thinking about like who they want to work with or what types of programs they want to create, it's like, people like themselves prior to them finding yoga. I mean, not always that's the case. And obviously things shift and grow as people do as well. But I feel like that's often the case is, people will come for a certain reason, kind of like you mentioned, and then be interested in working with people that are similar to how they were prior to finding yoga. Hey everyone, we're just taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about Offering Tree. I wanted to remind you about the special discount you can get with Offering Tree. I love telling yoga teachers about Offering Tree because not only is it your one-stop shop for all things that you need in your yoga business, but it is also easy to use, it's affordable, and it's truly an amazing company to work with. Offering Tree lets you sell courses, run classes, manage memberships, and so much more with just one account. That's right, just one login for all those parts of your business. One of the best parts about Offering Tree is their online store. You can sell digital content like yoga videos, challenges, and courses right from your website. If you're teaching yoga classes and looking to level up, selling digital content is the next step to growing your business. Over the last year, we've seen so much pivot and change happen in the yoga industry, and having your own unique yoga business where you offer your students different course material can be so beneficial in creating a sustainable business with diversified income. And while there's many different platforms that you can create courses on these days, Offering Tree's course tools are easy to use and they're really affordable. And if you have a website you already like, you can still use Offering Tree. But there's one other thing I want to tell you about Offering Tree that makes all the difference in the world to me and probably to you too. They're a company that truly cares about yoga teachers and the wellness industry overall. I chose to partner with Offering Tree because I love the product and I love the people. Whenever yoga teachers have a suggestion for something that they need out of the platform, they can reach out directly to the people at Offering Tree and they're actually heard. So much of the development that Offering Tree has gone through over the last year has been because of yoga teachers like yourself. So if you're looking to save time, energy, and money in your yoga business, Offering Tree is hands down the software for you. Go to offeringtree.com/MBOM to learn more and get your discount. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
We're all looking for purpose and meaning. We're all looking to feel like we're useful in what we do. And when you enter into it's a saturated market now. So when you enter into that space of yoga, trying to find like where you sit into it besides just teaching classes, at the local studio or gym is it's an interesting process to create a career out of it right now. And I think if you try to do it on just basically classes, the only way that you can get a foothold is to create a trend or a gimmick or something like this. And so we always encourage people to bring it back to the inner game and bring it back to your life and bring it back to using the system of yoga, right? The methodology of it to create benefit and service. But what is that benefit and service? right? Because, it works. The 8 limbs, it works with your relationships. It works with yourself. It works with your body. It works with your energy system, with your breath. It works with your senses. It works with your mind. So it's uniquely positioned to help people on so many levels. And when we get people niching, we always say, well, okay, they still have to work with the external world. What do they most need in their body to get this desired result? What do they most need in their energy system? What do they need to do with their mindsets? How do they tap into a higher consciousness? It's the same all of the time. We're all working on all of those levels. So once you work it out, you can work on all of that system of going from gross to subtle to get people, the result.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, for sure. And yeah, I think it's interesting because while it is a really saturated market, I feel like there are a lot of people, just teaching yoga classes or teaching, public classes at studios or gyms. And a lot of people are focusing on, the physical aspect of the asana. And I know something you mentioned at the beginning was just, how much as a society we need this like deeper level healing. So I feel like for people who are interested in that, I do feel like there's a lot of space in the market for that or for introducing people to that. Would you agree?
I wouldn't encourage any of my new students to do it as a focus. I mean, if you want to do a supplementary income, and teach some classes at a studio or at the gym, fantastic. But if you want to make it your career, your livelihood, I wouldn't recommend it. And I think when we enter in that space for like the physical and that people need it, I mentioned before, you're entering in and you're competing with the fitness industry, because most people, when they come to a studio, the largest percentage see it as an alternate physical offering. And it's easy to back that up, because if you look at any of the studios and it's an hour class, 50 minutes, 55, if not the whole hour, is the physical focus. So it's all asana based and people are coming for a physical result. And if you focus on the physical, you're just going to get a physical result. What we're trying to say is there's a whole bunch of results beyond the physical. And I get, yes, there's a lot of people that want that physical, and maybe it's a stretch method as opposed to a weight method or whatever other systems of exercise there are. But I think, again, yeah, if you want to make it your career, I think you have to look beyond that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
no,
put my focus
100%.
there.
Yeah, no, 100%. I definitely agree with you that you need to look beyond just the studio classes. I guess what I was thinking was in terms of like a saturated market and looking at the way we can find our niche. Like there's a lot of opportunities in the limbs of yoga outside of just the limb of asana. That's what I was trying to communicate.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I've worked with elite sport. I worked, with, Olympic gold medalists in swimming. Travel with them for 4 or 5 years, and then traveled on the pro surf tour. And, I've worked with CEOs, Fortune 500 companies. I've worked in disability as niches. And essentially, you're working in all the same ways. You're just languaging it differently, right? And the way that you work within those spaces or the practices that you use are different combinations. It's still the same system, but it has to be languaged to, how they're going to best connect to it,
Mm-hmm.
and then give them
Yeah,
the practices
100%.
that sort of, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. I was just thinking about that actually, because I do feel it's kind of interesting. Like, I do feel like with yoga, at least in my experience, it was kind of like, okay, I recognized that there was something different about the practice than like just going to the gym. And it was something that felt really good that I wanted more of. And I think that had to do with like the breath and movement and a lot of, these other aspects of yoga that aren't just like doing chaturangas and holding boat poses and trying to get a six pack or whatever, people come to yoga for. It's like, okay, I was getting something deeper out of it. However, it seemed like in order for me to really deepen that practice, I had to go do a yoga teacher training because I was just getting really little snippets of what this sort of ancient practice was all about if it wasn't just about sun salutations and chair poses and that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's right because, the physical body is just a gateway to a higher possibility. It's a gateway to the subtle body. In the system, that's the asana is designed, the sthira and sukha asana, is like create a steady, comfortable body. So your body ceases to become an obstacle and you can move beyond the body and start to work into the subtle body. And then once you balance the subtle body and nervous system, you can start to work into the causal body. And then you go beyond that into the greater intelligence, the system of working towards that. But it's not working the physical body for the point of getting flexibility or getting strong or looking good in lycra. It's just working in a way that we are creating the condition for ourselves to go beyond the body to something deeper, a gateway to the mystical. Really, our body's a gateway to the mystical. So that's the way we kind of approach it. But now I'm not going to talk to Olympic swimmers like that. No, we're just doing this as a gateway to the mystical. I'm going to be working with them very, very practically on their core alignment and shoulders and strength and, those sorts of things. But in my head, I'm still doing that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's like if you say that to a group of swimmers, they're going to be like, who is this quack? What is he on about?
That's right. I mean, when I worked in the Olympic swim program, we would travel around and I was termed like a body mind coach, and really like early, 2000. And so really one of the first people doing that at that level of, a mind, not just a body coach, but a mind coach. And so we're already a bit ostracized, and the old school were questioning and doubting us and ho-humming like what we were doing because it's quite alternative to the old school way of training. So it was that was very interesting. It's what itself. And like you were saying, when I was a kid, yoga was a very fringe alternative thing when I first started teaching, and certainly when mum was teaching. And there weren't many kids that had mums for yoga teachers, but now probably every second kid's mum's a yoga teacher. There's so many of them out there. And it's played
true.
At halftime at the Super Bowl, and, the corporations pick it up and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Very
I mean,
different.
it's like a curse and a blessing, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably in some ways easier to get these like jobs or opportunities teaching yoga when there were less yoga teachers, but there were less yoga teachers because there was less demand for it, right? So less people were practicing. So it's kind of like, having more people know of this practice means that more people want to have it as a career, which makes it like harder to compete in some ways. But there's a bigger market for people who actually probably are aware of what yoga is. Like I would imagine your mom probably often was met with like, what's a yoga teacher? What's yoga? What do you do?
100%. And I think at the beginning, I talked about how it's kind of devolved. I mean, when my mum was teaching, there was always a connecting in phase of the class, and then pranayam, and then doing, the asana class, and then doing some pratyahara practice, like relaxation, then pratyahara practice, then pranayam, some kriya and meditation. And like it was powerful. And over the years of teaching, that went backwards and backwards and backwards to more purely physical, taking all of that other aspect out. But we made it physical and we took the spiritual out. And that takes the heart out of what it is. And now we're starting to inject the spirit back in to the practice. It's like me injecting spirit into business. It makes a massive difference. If you take the spirit out of the yoga and just make it physical, you've lost it. It's no longer that term yoga. So it's fine to do the asana, the whole class, but you have to be injecting the spirit into it in some shape or form. Otherwise, we've lost, and it was definitely lost there for quite a while. But I think actually the pandemic's helping that process, because people are struggling on a much bigger levels than the physical, and now they're looking for solutions outside of that. And in some ways, that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. I love that, injecting the spiritual back into yoga and injecting the spiritual into our yoga businesses. And yeah, I think that there are silver linings coming out of this whole pandemic situation. And I think that that could be one of them, like people seeking something deeper mentally and spiritually.
Agreed.
Amazing. Well, I think this might be the perfect place to wrap up. You've talked a little bit about having this amazing sounding program. Can you share with listeners a little bit about what that is and where people can go to find that?
Yeah, our site is called Yoga Coach, yogacoach.com. And you can find it Yogi Online. We have two bigger programs. One is called Yoga Life Coach, and that's 300 hours. And that program, it has a bigger focus on yoga, and it's teaching you how to work one-on-one or one-on-one in a group setting. And then it's supported by doing all the foundations to be able to launch online. The Yogi Online is for teachers that have a business or a business idea. It's 1,000 hours training. It's 9 months. And it's a bigger focus on business that is underpinned by yoga. So depending on, which direction you want to go in, you can see those different things on yogacoach.com. Currently, at the moment, we have, I don't know how long this before it comes out, but at the moment we have, some free weekly called the Yogi Launchpad, Facebook group. And we go weekly through helping yoga teachers, what they need to do, the sort of exact steps in the right order to be able to launch online properly. And that's called the Yogi Launchpad. Cool. You'll find that on the website as well.
Amazing. I will make sure that there's links for all of that. Thank you so much for your time and all your wisdom and everything you shared today, Mark.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, it's great. I enjoyed it. I like talking about business for yogis. It's a good topic.
Me too. I love it. All right, friends, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Mark Breadner from Yoga Coach Academy. Make sure you go check out everything that he's up to in his business. And if you want to continue this conversation with us, we have a really great conversation on MBO Behind the Scenes, all about how to stand out from the competition online. So as soon as Mark mentioned that he had been teaching online for a number of years, I knew I wanted to pick his brain on, how you go about doing that in such a saturated market. So we're talking all about that, and he's got some fabulous tips. That's over at patreon.com/MBM Yoga. And of course, I would love to see you behind the scenes. Thanks again to our sponsor, OfferingTree. To start spending more time with students and less time with software, head on over to offeringtree.com/MBOM to get an exclusive discount. And thank you to you for listening to this episode of the show. I couldn't do it without you. And of course, I'll see you next week. All right, bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.